Hi everybody, today we are going to be using freezer paper, yes, freezer paper, to make these beautiful cards, and I'm going to show you how. Now, I know I said that you are not going to need stencils anymore, that's what my thumbnail says. That's not quite the case, but this will replace a lot of your stencils. This technique is so cool. You will need freezer paper, plastic coated freezer paper, that is very important, it has to be plastic coated, and I know a lot of you guys already have this in your cupboards. So this is going to be a great stenciling tool for us. And what we're going to do is we're just going to cut some die cuts out of this freezer paper. Now it's important that the plastic side is facing down when you are going to put it on your card. So just make sure that when you are cutting out any words or letters or anything like that, that you are using the correct side. So the back side of that thanks should be the plastic coated side. And now what we're going to do is we are going to just place this in a laminator. I'm just using a carrier sheet there, and that is just parchment paper. It's not anything special. So I'm just folding that parchment paper over, and I'm placing this with the plastic side down directly onto the card that I'm going to make. I'm putting that through the laminator. Now the important thing about this is that the laminator has to be set to a pretty high heat. On my laminator, it's number 5. My laminator has 2 settings, one is 3 and one is 5. To be honest, I'm not quite sure the difference. I think it has to do with the thickness of the plastic sheet that you put through, but that does make it hotter, so you do want it on a hotter setting. And I did have to put this through a couple of different times, which is totally fine. And once it's done, there you can see it's completely stuck onto the card. That plastic melted onto the card base, and now that thanks is perfectly adhered. And so you have a stencil that is not going to move, and I'll show you later how we get that off. I'm going to do a really intricate stencil here. This is from Spellbinders, one of my new favorite dies. It's an absolutely gorgeous one, still available in their shop. I'll link that. Something like this would be pretty hard to stencil, like if you just cut it out of like cardstock or something like that. But because we're going to adhere it to the cards that we are making, we're going to adhere it to the paper, it's not going to move at all. So I'm just putting it through my laminator again. There you go. And you notice that the carrier sheet doesn't cover the whole thing, and that's totally fine. And the reason for that is because really we only want to make sure that the edge that is going through doesn't lift up as it's going through. We want to make sure that it stays in place. And it stays in place pretty well. Like I didn't have to put any tape or anything on that. And now I'm just going to treat it like a regular stencil. So I'm just going ahead and I'm doing some ink blending here. These are some Distress Oxide inks, which I love. And I'm just doing a rainbow colored theme. So going through and just blending those together, and you'll see that the thanks right now is going to be completely covered up. And that's, again, totally fine, because what we're going to do afterwards is we're going to lift up that thanks the same way that we would do any other stencil. Distress oxides are water reactive, so I'm just splashing a little water on there for a little bit of interest on the card. Now I'm going ahead and working on my other card, again using the Distress Oxides, and the die that I used was kind of a flowery theme die, and so I'm kind of just putting in where I think leaves and flowers and stuff like that would be. So I'm using different shades so that I can get a bit more interest in the dimension of the flower and kind of the look of the flower. And you can see here I'm now going in and putting in where the flowers would be before I did the leaves, and just going through and adding the color where I think it would be. And it looks pretty messy, but that is totally okay, because again, this is a stencil. It is adhered to the card, but we are going to be lifting that up, and it comes off very easily, I promise you. Now, something that's really interesting that I discovered in the course of doing this, and you'll see later on as I create the cards, is I realized as I lifted up the stencil, you actually get a 2-for-1, because the stencil ends up looking just as beautiful as the area that I stenciled on the card. And what I found out after the fact is you can actually use both pieces. Well, we'll take a look at that, but now I'm going to work on another card, and this one is kind of an Art Deco set. This is an old kit from Spellbinders, and I thought that this intricate look here would be really great for this technique. So I'm going ahead, cutting that out, putting that through with the carrier sheet as well. And what I found is that when you put it through the carrier sheet, the first time helps adhere it just enough so that it sticks to the card. And then if you take off the carrier sheet the next couple of times that you put it through, it really helps to make sure that that doesn't lift up. And it stays really very well. Like, you you would not be able to get this off without using some heat, and I'm going to show you how to do that a little bit later. But again there, you do have to use the number 5 setting. And there you can see it's completely adhered to the card. Now this was completely an experiment as I was doing this. So I decided that I was going to go ahead and use some lunar paste because I like that gold glitter look to it, and I thought that looked very Art Deco. So I'm going ahead and I'm putting the paste all over this paper, and you will see in a little bit that that turns out to be a mistake. It's not a terrible mistake because the card still ends up looking nice, but it does end up looking different than the way I had intended it to look. So just bear that in mind, that when you use something that is called a paste, it will definitely stick something down pretty semi-permanently. I'm going ahead and I'm doing another die cut here. This one, I don't know where this die came from. It's one of the oldest in my collection, so if anybody knows, let me know down in the comments. And again, it's a pretty intricate die, and what I like about these techniques is that you can use this on really intricate dies, and because it sticks to the paper, you're not going to get any mistakes. You're not going to get any areas where it might show through underneath, and even the really fine lines come out really well. So just doing this again and putting it through several times, and don't worry if you do have to put it through several times. Your laminator might be hotter than mine is, so you might not need to do it as many times. Mine is just the Amazon basic laminator, and I'll link that down below, but it is just, you know, your run-of-the-mill laminator, and it works just fine. And there you go, it's completely adhered to that. So I decided to go ahead and use watercolor for this, and this technique, this freezer paper technique, is a really great one for watercolors. So like with regular stencils, you can use distress oxides all day long, but with regular stencils, you'd have a really hard time using watercolors because that watercolor will have a tendency to kind of get underneath your stencil and kind of mess up your image. But with this, because it's adhered to the paper, it's not going to get underneath that. So I'm able to go ahead and watercolor this all over the place. And even though this is quote-unquote freezer paper, because it's plastic and it's adhered on the back, it is not going to lift up. And you'll see again, this is another technique that I realized after the fact, is that it makes a beautiful secondary image. So I will have, when I lift up the freezer paper, a beautiful image that comes out. And so there you can see I am going to use my heat gun to use that to lift up the stencil. Because it's plastic adhered, I melt the plastic just a little bit, and there you go. I just peel that right off. Isn't that pretty? And what I found, here you go, there's my secondary image. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a card out of this image. So there is card 1. Doesn't that image look beautiful? The way that the watercolors worked there with the die cut. I really like how that came out. And that sentiment is a Spellbinders sentiment from their Betterpress collection, if you were curious about that. Now for the next card, as you know, I had seen how that stenciled piece had come out really beautiful because even though it was a stencil, the colors that I had used had still adhered to it. So I was really curious, knowing that the plastic was still on the back, like, would this be able to adhere again? So you can see I'm kind of testing it out here to see, like, will this come up? Will this stick to the paper? And I find actually it sticks really well to the paper, almost as if I had gone ahead and just done this for the first time. So that tells me two things, actually. One, that I can reuse it similar to this. I can use the secondary image to make a card out of. The other would be that I could reuse this stencil. I'm not quite sure how many times I'd be able to reuse it, but it seems like I would definitely be able to reuse it if that's what I wanted to do. So I'm going to go ahead and use the secondary image, and I'm going to use this to make a card. Now, if you're wondering what I'm doing here, I had decided that I was actually going to use die to cut out the corners of the paper and put some snowflakes there. But I wanted that to show through with some sparkle and some shine, and so I just went ahead and used an embossing pen. It's just a pen that has embossing ink in it, and just scribbled some spots there and then embossed that. So that way when I'm putting it over the base there, that sparkle shines through from where I have cut out those die cut snowflakes. And you can see how this is perfectly adhered. It's not going to come up at all. There is my bonus card completed. I think for a card that I wasn't intending to make, I think it came out pretty well. What do you guys think of this secondary card? Back to my Art Deco card, I'm just using that same kit that the die originally came from, and I am just going to cut out some images that I've stamped here. I'm just using a piece of scrap paper here. Now here I just wanted to add a little bit more dimension to the cards, so I'm going in where the lines kind of connect and just adding a little bit of shadow. And I thought it would kind of make it look like, you know, the pillars in a dance hall with the shadows there, and it would kind of play on that. Again, this didn't quite turn out the way that I wanted it to. We will see. Now this is where I'm going in with my heat gun, and I'm using the heat gun there to loosen the plastic that's on the back, similar to like I did with the other cards. However, unlike the other cards, this is actually not coming up. It's actually ripping the paper that's underneath as I pull it up, and I realize it's because I used the paste. And the paste really adhered that stencil directly to the paper in a way that I cannot get it up without ruining the card. So you know what, I decided we're just going to go with it. It still looks pretty cool with that paste there and the dimension. You can still see the stencil background there, even though it ends up not being a stencil. So I just decided to roll with it, and it still looks like a good card. I added a few embellishments, and then there's our completed card. And you know, when you make mistakes in card making, I go with the Bob Ross sentiment of there's no mistakes, just happy accidents. So I think it still turned out pretty well. Going back to our first card, the thanks card, I decided to make this a shaker. And I decided to make it a kind of frameless shaker by using a piece of acetate. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to score that acetate so that it fits directly around my card. And you know me guys, I'm very imprecise, no measuring, I just kind of eyeballed it around that card. Now I'm going ahead and heating up that stencil again, and I'm just going to then be able to lift it up. Now I probably could have used this thanks image as a secondary card, but I decided not to, so I will keep that for later though. Now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to use these embellishments. These are dollar store embellishments, which I really think are fun, and I'm just going to go ahead and finish up this card. I used a variety of kind of rainbow colored embellishments and fruits and different fun things like that, and then just put it on a black card base and then added some embellishments with just a gold pen. And so there's that final card. Going back to that intricate Spellbinders die, I'm going ahead and just peeling that off, and you see it just comes off really easily. I did use the heat gun off camera to do that, and you can kind of see how it comes out there. Now this die set did come out with different flowers that actually match those larger flowers that are in the center, so I am going to use some dies to go ahead and cut those out. Now I just want to take a moment to say how much I love this little Sidekick. I find it so much more useful when I'm cutting out little intricate dies than hauling out my big machine, and I can just have this on my counter and just put things through really quickly, especially when I'm doing a lot of little die cuts all at the same time. So you guys should check that out. The link is right here, and so go ahead and check that out if that's of interest to you, but I just find it so much easier than using the big machine. This card was originally intended to be a slimline card, I think, but I decided to actually make it into two different cards. and you can see that it really does fit 2 different card sizes there. And so with that one image, you can actually get a lot of different cards out of it. So actually out of this one image, I ended up getting 3 different cards when you count the stencil that I then am able to use for a different card later on. And those larger dies that I'm using are Spellbinders dies. And I just put it all together, and this is what the final result looks like. So that's card number 1, made with this. And then this is card number 2, made with the same thing. Didn't that come out lovely? I just love this method, you guys. It is so versatile, and I just love being able to make so many different cards with it. Now, you may know I'm a huge hoarder and I hate wasting anything, especially wasting specialty paper like glitter paper. So I was like, you know what, I wonder what I can make out of these little scraps that I cut out from the previous card. So this next card I'm making is basically entirely made out of scraps. It's made out of the scrap stencil paper, the freezer paper. This piece behind it is a scrap piece of paper from another card I made a long time ago. And then all these little elements here I'm just cutting out and reusing because, again, I cannot stand to waste something that is so pretty. Now, as I was cutting this out, I was originally going to do what I was going to do with the first card, which was make 2 cards out of it, but then I thought this would make a really cool trifold card. So I'm actually cutting it in half, but I am using the 2 pieces on the same card. So there's my last card for this video done. What did you guys think? What do you guys think about this technique? Is this something that you'll try out? I found this technique to be super easy, super fun to use, and kind of limitless because, you know, you can use it with any dies that you have, especially even the most intricate dies that you have. I just love that you can kind of adhere it to the paper and that you get 2 for 1. So just let me know if this is something that you guys use, something that you guys do. I'd love to see your creations. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, and share, and I will catch you next time.